Hi dear friends, some words of Torah for Parshat Shelach. One of the stories of Bamidbar that seems arbitrarily slapped onto our Parsha is that of the Mekoshesh Eitzim. The Torah opens with the words, Vayihiyu b'nei Yisrael Bamidbar. The Jewish people were in the desert, and they found someone gathering sticks on the holy day of Shabbat. They didn't know what to do with this violator until God told Moshe that he was to be executed. Why does this story appear in our Parsha? Why does it open with the obvious words, the Jewish people were in the desert? Isn't that something I'd have already surmised if it appears in a book called Bamidbar, literally in the desert? The Midrash teaches us that this gatherer of stones was none other than Tzolofchad, the man whose daughters would approach Moshe at the end of the 40-year desert sojourn and would request to inherit their father's portion in Eretz Yisrael. He acted, according to the Midrash, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. That is, he knew that what he was doing was a sin, and he was prepared to sacrifice his life in order to teach the Jewish people an invaluable lesson about the importance of performing mitzvot even before entering the land. He deliberately violated the Sabbath to demonstrate that, despite being in the desert, Jews were still accountable for disregarding the Torah's commands. Let's examine a portion of the Talmud which deliberates over how Tzolofchad's act of gathering sticks constituted a Shabbat violation. What specific milacha of the 39 forms of labor did Tzolofchad perform when gathering the sticks? Now, there are three opinions. Number one, that Tzolofchad was guilty of carrying the sticks in a public domain, that is, without an eruv. This is known as the milacha of hotza'ah. Number two, that he was guilty of cutting branches that were still growing from a tree. This is the malacha of tolesh, harvesting. Or number three, he was guilty of making piles of wood, which is the malacha of me'amer, taking disparate components and making an organized pile out of them on the Sabbath. From the narrative, we know that Tzolofchad violated Shabbos. Why does the Gemara feel it necessary to identify which specific melacha of Shabbat he violated? The Gemara offers a technical reason, but we will offer a homiletic one, assuming that all three actions are metaphors for important lessons. According to many commentaries, Tzolofchad committed his act shortly after the sin of the spies, of the Meraglim. He noted how Bnei Yisrael had spurned the Holy Land and were trying to come to terms with how they would make the best of their lives in the desert for the next 40 years. Tzolofchad may have perceived that in their efforts to adjust, the people may have dismissed Eretz Yisrael as being merely good that was advocated by God, but not necessarily so absolutely vital to their ultimate destiny. If we need to live outside of Eretz Yisrael, no. Tzolofchad knew that this was the wrong attitude. If Hashem had declared to Moshe that the ultimate objective of the Exodus was to bring us into Eretz Yisrael, then for the Jews, life outside of the land was incomplete. No matter how spiritually enriching life could be in the desert, encamped around the divine presence, it was not a sufficient substitute for life in the holiest of all places on earth. Tzolofchad sought to demonstrate this through his Sabbath violation. Not only did he demonstrate that mitzvot were still necessary in the desert, he also demonstrated through his act what exactly had been damaged and compromised as a result of our not being able to enter and live in Eretz Yisrael. The rabbis dispute which melacha he did in order to demonstrate that lesson. The first opinion is that he carried an object of value from one place to another. This is a melacha that many people have trouble understanding why it's forbidden. After all, I haven't done anything to change the object that I'm transporting. How is this a constructive melacha? Tzolofchad sought to demonstrate that displacing an object actually makes a big difference. Moving something that belongs in place A to place B means that you have significantly impacted the object. Where people occupy themselves spatially and geographically does matter. When you are in the Holy Land, your spiritual essence is closer to God, and all your actions count more. Because we sinned with the spies, we have been transported to a place in the desert, a place where we don't belong. This is significant damage to us, and we should strive with all our might to rectify it and get back to where we once belonged. The second opinion is that Tzolofchad uprooted living branches from a living tree. What's the big deal when you pull a branch off a tree? It may look the same, but the branch that has been snapped off will never again grow leaves, flowers, or fruit. You may think that we're the same people regardless of where we are, but that would be like suggesting that a branch is a branch, regardless of whether it's attached to the tree or not. Our spiritual productivity is dramatically compromised because we cannot grow in Eretz Yisrael, the tree of all our respective branches. The third opinion is that Tzolofchad gathered together sticks and made a pile out of them. Recall that the original plan for the Jewish people was to enter the land almost immediately after receiving the Torah and then dispersing throughout the Holy Land, so that we could start our lives on our respective properties and farms. Each family was originally destined to live all across the land from Dan to Be'er Sheva, separated by property lines. Yes, we were meant to remain one people, but we would be spatially separated, allowing each other breathing space to build a life for ourselves in Eretz Yisrael. With the sin of the spies, we found ourselves having to live in one very urbanized area, in our densely populated tents. Instead of being allowed to disperse, we were forced to live together for an extended period of time, only because Hashem saw how fragile and prone to sin we were, and so had us live in an artificial environment to ensure that none of us would fall between the cracks. This may be the way of the Golus Yid, the diaspora Jew, who must live in his ghetto to prevent him from assimilating, but it is not the ultimate destiny for the Eretz Yisrael Jew, who, as the prophet Micha prophesied for the utopian end of days, V'yashavu ish tachat gafno v'tachat te'enato ve'en macharid. Each person will sit beneath his vine and fig tree without any fear. One of the great benefits of living in the land is that we need no longer live as the ghettoized Jew of Galut. Tzolofchad's great love and recognition of the land is what prompted his daughters, some 40 years later, to petition Moshe for a portion of their father's beloved Eretz Yisrael. I feel that Tzolofchad's lesson to his fellow Jews of that time is a message that still needs to be heard by so many of us in Chutz La'aretz, especially now when so many are rethinking their long-term plans of where we would like ourselves and our families to end up. We need to remind ourselves that living in Eretz Yisrael isn't just desirable because of the anti-Semitism that we've now encountered in the diaspora. Rather, we are truly missing out from the gifts of Eretz Yisrael so long that we allow ourselves to remain in the desert. Perhaps it is time to end our desert sojourn. Let us hear, dear friends, the beckoning call of our beloved land. May we see our ingathering. B'mehera b'yameinu, amen. Here's wishing you a beautiful Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom.